Hi, it's Brandon with Your Right Website, back with another video. Today we're talking about boilerplate and why you should never start a project from scratch. Having the right boilerplate code is going to make working on new projects so much easier for you as a developer. A good developer knows never to start a project from scratch. In this video, we're going to talk a bit about what boilerplate code is, what makes a good boilerplate, and then I'm going to show you my boilerplate in action that I use for developing custom WordPress websites. If you're not a WordPress developer, there's still some good information in this video, and it can be applied to whatever tech stack you work with, whether that's WordPress, Laravel, Node.js, React, or something else. So, what is boilerplate? Boilerplate is code that's reusable and repeatable so you don't have to do the same thing over and over. For instance, in my projects as a WordPress developer, I have boilerplate code that lets me quickly set up a new WordPress site and has common elements that I'm going to use for every site already built, so I don't have to build them for every project. This includes things like a basic site template, site navigation, and some custom WordPress blocks built with advanced custom fields that consist of commonly used components such as hero areas, grids, and calls to action and things like that. In fact, you can see my boilerplate up on the screen behind me here. Let's talk about what makes good boilerplate code. Ideally, good boilerplate makes starting a new project quick and easy for you because it lets you jump right into the new parts of the project, and you can save time because you're not recoding things that are the same between all of your different projects. Depending on the type of projects you work on, boilerplate can be as simple as a few configuration files stored in a GitHub repo that you use to build every new project, to as complicated as multiple pre-developed class files that you use on every project. It really depends on the types of projects that you're working on. Good boilerplate code has the goal of letting you code what's new for a given project rather than spending time setting up or recoding the same things that appear in every project over and over again. For instance, in my projects as a WordPress developer, I know each site's going to have the same elements. There's going to be a WordPress site with plugins, a theme with a header and a footer, and custom blocks for things that all clients are going to have on their site, such as a hero area, grid, image block, etc. Why should I make these things from scratch for every project? I shouldn't. Good boilerplate code gives you a place to start from so you don't have to repeat yourself project to project. For your boilerplate, you might have a starter theme you work from that you clone in GitHub for each project. Or it might be a collection of PHP classes that handle CRUD operations so you don't have to write your classes for interacting with a database from scratch project to project. Or your boilerplate might just be a customized composer.json or package.json file that pulls down the same packages for every project. How complex or simple your boilerplate code is something that's completely up to you. The main goal is to not repeat yourself when moving from project to project. If you find you're doing the same thing on more than one project, chances are it belongs in your boilerplate. Just because you have boilerplate code doesn't mean you can't override it for a specific project either. Boilerplate is something you bring in at the beginning of the project knowing that it can be tweaked and customized based on the given project's needs. For instance, I have some boilerplate for a hero section in my WordPress setup, but it might need to be tweaked based on the template design or adjusted for spacing or other design changes. Changing your boilerplate in one project doesn't mean changing the source files for your boilerplate unless you find that the new change is useful and something you can apply to other projects moving forward. So to summarize, boilerplate code should keep you from doing the same thing over and over again. If you have something you find yourself coding in each project you do, this belongs in your boilerplate code so you never have to write it from scratch again. So you might be asking yourself, what does a good boilerplate look like? Well, I'm going to show you my boilerplate that I wrote for my WordPress development projects. I have a starting theme that I use for WordPress called Patriot WP, which is based off of the excellent Sage 10 theme by Roots. I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes tour of how I set up my boilerplate, and hopefully you'll get some ideas on how you can set up the boilerplate for your own projects. What you see in front of you is the boilerplate that I use for my WordPress projects. This is a theme that's called Patriot WP. And I installed this site the other day, and it took about 15 minutes to get this site up and running to this state. The nice thing about the boilerplate is when it's time for me to go ahead and build a new website, I have a nice starting point to start with. So as a part of the Sage 10 framework that I use with my sites, I manage WordPress a little bit differently than a stock WordPress install. Whereas regular WordPress might install plugins from the plugin repo, I have everything managed in Composer, where I can use a package manager to actually pull in my WordPress plugins. So if we take a look in my VS Code here, there's a composer.json file that manages all of the dependencies for the WordPress project. And if we look here at the requirements, you can see all of the different plugins that I use. And this is part of the boilerplate because it allows me to quickly add all of the plugins that I'm going to use on every client site and not have to manually download those from the WordPress plugin repo. We have things like advanced custom fields, safe redirect manager, 404 page, word fence, etc. A lot of the plugins I use are just convenience plugins or security plugins. So things like the 404 page I would call a convenience plugin. Word fence is a security plugin. But these are things that are going to appear on every client's site. So having this composer.json as a part of my boilerplate just allows me to quickly install all of the plugins that I'm going to need for a new site. If we jump back over to WordPress, you'll see that what we have set up is a basic theme. We have our header area, we have a hero area, and then we have a footer. And how this is all managed is there's a custom theme that I have set up that I use as the basis for all of my new projects. And if I go to themes, you'll see that I have this Patriot WP theme, and that's a part of my boilerplate because I'm always starting my new project with this theme. And the beauty of that is because I'm starting with this theme, I have elements that are always going to be available to me in my projects. For instance, one of the things I really wanted to include in my boilerplate was having a navigation element built into the theme. It's pretty much a given that every site that I'm going to be building is going to have some form of navigation, and usually navigation is pretty similar across all of the different sites. Usually navigation is going to be just links across the top, and there might be some style changes site to site, but the overall structure is going to be the same. So by having that in my boilerplate, I don't have to code a new navigation from scratch every time that I do a new client's website. I can just use the existing navigation, and that allows me to focus my time on tweaking the navigation to the client's specific needs rather than building a new navigation from scratch for every project. Another place where my boilerplate comes into play is with custom blocks. Now, I like building WordPress sites with custom blocks using advanced custom fields. I've just found that's the easiest way for me to build a WordPress website. So as a part of my boilerplate, I have a whole bunch of custom blocks that I have available to me in my boilerplate theme that I can reuse on every site. So for instance, if I go into the home page and edit that, I'm going to load up the home page and we're going to take a look at the custom blocks. If we go into the block editor in WordPress, we can just click here and hit plus, hit browse all. And then I've got all these custom blocks that I've built for Your Right website, which is my web development company, for various things that I find sites are going to be using over and over again. There's things like hero areas, like you see on the home page. And then there's some other things like grids. You know, a common thing on a website is to have a grid with images next to each other. Things like a call to action bar, things like an accordion or a YouTube video. Things like a blog post puller to pull posts from the blog based on a category. There's all these different things that most sites are probably going to use or have in one form or another. So I figured I would add that into my boilerplate because I don't want to be creating a 3-column grid from scratch for every project. So by having these elements ready to go in the theme as boilerplate, I don't have to code them from scratch for every client's project. And that allows me to focus my time on delivering a solution for each client that is unique to them. So rather than spending all my hours building an accordion or building a grid, I can tweak the one that comes with my boilerplate to match their design and specific specifications, and then I can focus my energy on building a custom solution that's actually going to solve my client's problem somewhere else in their project. Now for you, you might be doing something completely different than I am. I'm assuming you may or may not be a WordPress developer. You may be developing with different tools. So it's possible that your boilerplate is going to look completely different from what I have here. But the main thing I want to drive home is just a good boilerplate is going to help save you time because you're not going to be writing the same thing over and over again. If you're doing a Laravel app, if you're a Laravel developer, maybe there's something you find yourself doing for each site that you're building and thinking, hey, this thing is repetitive and I don't want to build this over and over again. That would be a good example of something to add to your boilerplate. Maybe you're a JavaScript developer and there's certain things that you're finding yourself doing over and over again. And maybe your boilerplate is just a set of JavaScript files that you include with every project that has some helpers or utility methods in it. What your boilerplate looks like is going to be totally dependent on the type of work you're doing. It's mainly just finding those elements where you're doing the same thing over and over again and finding a way to separate those out into a boilerplate that you can use when you're starting a new project so that you don't have to write that repetitive stuff over and over again. To show you the value of a good boilerplate, I'm actually going to go into a page in my WordPress site here that I've set up, and we're going to go ahead and create some new elements on the page using the boilerplate. So if we go in and add a new block, I'm going to go ahead and add some text with an image. And this block is configured for the maximum number of options that a client might want for a widget that shows text next to an image. It's built to kind of be a smart block that can be used in multiple different situations so that I'm not having to code a block that displays an image next to text in multiple ways. For instance, you can choose the image placement, so you want the image on the left or the right. You can choose the image that you want just from the WordPress media library. You can have a text headline, but it's optional because some clients might want a text headline and some might not. There's free-form text content. So this is just a place for clients to put their text. And then there's an optional call to action button. So sometimes clients might want to link off to another page, like a purchase page. And then sometimes clients might want to link off to a externally hosted page. So you wanted to open in a new tab. But basically, this block, as it is in my boilerplate, allows for a lot of different customizability because I didn't want to have to be coding a new block that displays an image for every single client's website that I work on. By having one block that's smart, that allows me to change these settings dynamically, I'm able to reuse this block in the majority of cases where a client wants to show an image next to some text. So if we save this, we can actually take a look at the new page that's generated. And you can see, we have our image, we have our text, we have our button. If we want to go in, we can go and we can change some things. We can change the image placement. We can change the button style. If we save and then we refresh, you can see now we've changed things up. Oh, we don't like that. We're going to go ahead and put the button style back. We're going to put the text on the left, save it, reload it. Now we think that the page is too plain, so we need to make some adjustments. We're going to add a custom background color. We're going to go ahead and just choose a light color here. Make it pretty. Save it with a background color. Now we have a background color for the block, but now the spacing looks wrong because we have this butting up against each other. So another thing with the boilerplate that I built, There's predefined templates. So I'm going to go ahead and choose one that is a full width that has a header at the top with padding. Hit save. And then now we've lost our header because this is a template without a header. We're going to actually go ahead. We're going to go ahead and choose the other one with no padding because we want this block right up at the top. And then we're going to go margins, set some custom margins, set some custom margins to 0 because now we want this block at the top of the page. Now we have the block at the top of the page. We're going to add some padding. So we want, say, 90 pixels padding top and bottom, and then 60 on mobile. And we hit save. And now we have a block and a page that looks completely different from what we started with. And this is all just with one custom block in the boilerplate and some custom templates that are in the boilerplate. But you can see how quickly with this custom boilerplate I was able to iterate over making changes to this page because I had built this thing and invested the time to build something that's very customizable. So that's another thing as you're building your boilerplate, especially if it's for something variable like a client site. You might want to invest some time in figuring out how can you customize this to solve common problems that you're running into over and over again. Something like displaying text next to an image, at first glance seems really simple. I'm going to have text next to an image. But then you get a client who's like, let's move it over here. Let's move it over there. Let's, add some spacing, add some padding. And you find yourself doing these things manually over and over again. So a good boilerplate, if you're working with something client-facing, is going to give you flexibility to change things kind of on the fly. And if you're working in WordPress, maybe it's something like I built here, or maybe you're not working in WordPress. Maybe you're working just by hand coding CSS and HTML. In that case, your boilerplate might just be a set of CSS files and CSS classes that you can use to adjust things. Or it might be a set of HTML files that have different layouts that you want to offer your clients for displaying an image. Whatever your boilerplate looks like, the main goal is just to save time and stop doing repetitive tasks. So if you're doing something client-facing, it's worth spending a little time looking into what you're doing over and over again and thinking about that and thinking how can you kind of systematize it so that you don't have to do the same thing from scratch over and over again. And instead, you can just build something that you have ready to go so that you can spend your time focusing on delivering real solutions for your clients' problems instead of focusing on which side of the text the image is going to sit on. So in my system, I've built a lot of those little convenience methods into my blocks, and there's a lot more blocks, that do kind of similar things that give the client, an option to move something or change something. And it's really just, it really gives me a good starting point when I need to build out a site for somebody new, because I don't need to spend time, like I said, rebuilding these items. Like I don't ever have to build an accordion from scratch, or I don't ever have to build a grid from scratch because I have these boilerplate elements as custom blocks. And like I've been saying, it's going to look different for you depending on the type of projects you're working on, but it's really just finding what am I doing over and over again, and is there a way that I can kind of copy that out and not have to do it from scratch every time. And once you have your boilerplate kind of figured out, then it's just a matter of, how do you use that when starting a new project? Like in my project, I have the starter theme, and that's stored in GitHub, and I just do a clone of the theme every time that I want to start a new project. For you, it might be something similar, or it might just be, a folder on your hard drive with your source files that you copy from scratch. Or it might be, a set of configuration commands. If you're working in, something like Laravel, it might be a set of commands that you run, to pull down your packages every time you start a project. Your boilerplate can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. So in closing, having the right boilerplate is going to let you focus on what's unique for each project, rather than spending your time reinventing the wheel, doing the same thing over and over again. So now that this video is wrapping up, why don't you tell me in the comments what you're using for your boilerplate? I'd be really curious to hear what different people are using for their boilerplate and how they have their projects structured to kind of save themselves some work as they're building out their different projects. And if you need help building your own boilerplate, or you need help with WordPress or PHP, or using Git or HTML and CSS, or you just want somebody to bounce ideas off of, I'm available for code mentorship. Yeah, I have a website where I offer mentorship services. You can contact me and bounce ideas off of me, and I can show you some tips with working with WordPress, and you can ask questions about WordPress development, PHP development. The information for that website is going to be linked down in the description, but the website is yourrightwebsite.com, and click on the developer mentorship section. I'd love to work with you and learn more about your projects and help you out. Do some pair programming. That might be kind of fun. So if you want to work with me, my name's Brandon with Your Right Website, and I'd love to hear from you and be your code mentor. This concludes the video on boilerplate. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please give me a like. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. I'm going to be putting out some great developer content in the future. Thanks again for watching, and hope this was informative. Goodbye.